Welcome to Drinking and Driving. Here at Drinking and Driving, we'd like to remind you that drinking is fun and driving is fun. Just don't do them together. Have fun, but be safe. Hey, welcome to Drinkin' and Drivin'. This is Joe Yarbrough, your host. I've got my co-host, Dave Totaro, here. I have two brewers here, the men, the myth, the legends behind Beachfly Brewing. We'll talk about the name and a couple other things, drink some beer. I've got Zach Featherstone and Will Brant here. These guys are fairly new in the Melbourne area. Actually, I guess technically Indian Harbor Beach, but if you're not from the area, that difference doesn't mean much to you. So I know you guys have been here roughly a year. The first thing I really want to touch on is, so you opened last year on Thanksgiving Day. That was something that when I found that out, I was just like, I was intrigued. I just want to know kind of what's going on. So Will, I just was kind of asking, why Thanksgiving last year?
It was really our first opportunity where we had beer available. We were officially able to open and sell, and I think we knew that a couple things weren't quite in order, but we knew people were knocking on the door. They saw the trailer that Zach had parked out in front, and people were kind of curious about it. So at that point, we were able to put some beer in some glasses. I think we had 4 beers on tap at that time.
That trailer, by the way, was genius. That was everybody at where I work knew about it
for a year at least.
What's this Beachfly?
Exactly.
Yeah, that was smart.
Well, we also had Will's 10-year high school reunion on Friday after Thanksgiving, so they had already come in and wanted to have their event here. So if we didn't open and have our license, we were just gonna give away beer. I guess.
A house party. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is at that point it had to happen. Then I mean.
Our build out was 15, 16 months, and
wow.
we had planned a 3 to 6 month build out.
Oh my gosh.
We had Hurricane Irma came 1 month into our build out, which delayed us 6 months.
Wow.
We had a lot of issues.
Did the building get damaged from it?
Our roof got damaged. They had to redo the roof, and that's what we had roof leaks for almost 9 months after Irma. So it kind of delayed all of the rest of our build out. We also had just some permitting issues, which is pretty common in Brevard County right now.
Yep.
So we got everything done the week before Thanksgiving. We had all our inspections that Monday, Tuesday, and then me and my business partner, who is also my mother, drove up to Orlando to the alcohol people and submit our paperwork. And they're like, "All right, well, we'll review this and get it to you next week." And we're like, "Can you review it today?"
Next week?
And they're like, "Well, it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. People want to leave early." We're like, "Yeah, but it's also the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we have a 4-day weekend we'd like to sell some beer at." We go, "We've been, promoting this," and thankfully, the people at the Orlando TTV office were awesome. And
wow, that's really cool.
They sent us an email at 4:30 and said, "You're good to go. Here's your license. You'll have the paper one in the mail next week, but you're good to go." So my mom called me and said, "We got our license. What do you want to do? When you want to open Friday, or do you want to open on Thanksgiving?" I go, "Let's just open doors Thursday afternoon, see what happens."
So you knew like the day. You basically had 1 day notice that you we're going to start now.
So Wednesday night, I was here till about 2 a.m. cleaning, making sure our lines were flowing, and we had beer ready to go, but it just was. It's like waiting for the state to say we could go.
Yeah. And especially, I know you said you were here till 2 o'clock in the morning. It's one of those things where it's like, I know I shut the coffee pot off, but I'm going to go look at it again. Yep, the coffee pot's still off.
Exactly.
Did I turn the coffee? And you look at, and you dot the I's about 7 times and cross the T's, so. Yeah, I know that feeling.
Oh, yeah, it's a first impression.
Oh, my gosh. That
I would have been stressed.
That nervous energy. I mean, you weren't going to sleep that night regardless. So it's probably good that you were here till 2 anyway.
How was the turnout? Was it pretty good?
We had a good Thanksgiving. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, obviously we didn't do any advertising other than just I put on our Facebook, "Hey, we're open," and then we opened the doors and had music playing. And,
wow.
There's a lot of just people just walking by after Thanksgiving dinner and saw that the doors were open and the music was going, came in and check us out, and we had a nice little turnout.
I think it's actually a really good idea for a business like this to be open on Thanksgiving. Maybe not a whole day, maybe an abbreviated shift, something like that. Because it's like, think, at least for my family, you eat like maybe a lunch or kind of an early dinner, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And then you're like, cool, I've got nothing to do the rest of the day.
Well, plus, we're in Florida, so everybody associates everything with the beach. Even no holiday is like a normal traditional holiday here. So
yeah, I would say like in other places, like it's Thanksgiving, it's -3 outside, so
exactly.
I'm just gonna bundle up and stay home. But it's like, I mean, this year, what was it? I can't remember what last year.
It was beautiful out there.
Yeah, so
we had the doors open this year again, and it was 70.
Yeah, I mean, shorts and t-shirt. That's pretty much what I wore this year. I mean, that's what I wear.
So have you guys basically just in your brains, you've just sacrificed every Thanksgiving from now on?
Right now, it's a family tradition that
I like it,
and we don't have our employees come in or anything. It's just the family comes and we all just kind of run the bar together. Yeah. It's one that my mom doesn't bartend too often, but she bartends every Thanksgiving now.
Nice.
Our locals and regulars, when they're done with Thanksgiving dinner and they're like, sweet, let's go get a beer.
That makes perfect sense.
They expect,
to me.
It's kind of nice that we have that relationship.
So guess who's going to be here next year?
Santa Claus.
You can't see this on radio, but this finger is pointing at this guy. I'll be here because I literally had nothing to do. We ate the meal.
Really
and I was like, that was cool. We should. Now what am I going to do? So yeah, that's actually really cool. So I really wanted to hit that one first because it just to me seemed so awesome that you opened on Thanksgiving. Everybody needs something to kind of keep them, kind of set them apart from their peers. So you've got that, and the fact that it wasn't necessarily a planned thing; it happened. So that's actually something really neat about that particular thing. Based on your experience, so you've been open a little over a year. I'm assuming day one, you thought you knew some things, but now you've got some things you found that were kind of misconceptions. What's the biggest thing that you would say day one? I thought it was going to be this way, and now 370-ish days later, now it's something you were completely wrong. Is there anything that you can think of where you were just, maybe not completely wrong, or you had a misconception, but now it is now in stone? You're like, yep, I was wrong. Anything?
The brewery side has been about a year-long learning curve. Just figuring out exactly what works with our building and our equipment, and trying to fine-tune the quality of everything. I think from day one, I have a completely different approach now. So that's been pretty big.
Did you brew professionally before this?
I did in Denver for a couple years for a small brewery, and I worked on packaging for a larger production brewery in Denver. And then when I first moved back to Florida a couple years ago, I was running filtration and packaging for Florida Beer Company.
Okay. But it was still even having all that experience, it was still running a brew system.
Well, yeah, and everyone's set up, whether it's the equipment or the ingredients or just the way things have to work to get the job done, it's always different.
Yeah.
So there's, I don't think anyone would say that from day one, even if they got all the equipment on their Christmas list, it probably still wouldn't turn out quite the way they thought it would.
I mean, if you think of it, it's kind of like, I've been driving cars for how many years, but when you get that new car, it's like, oh, this one has a start button instead of a key. This one has, this one's standard, or this one's automatic. The shifter's here. So I mean, there's
same goal, different methodology.
Exactly. Even they're all cars. We've been driving cars for many. They're different enough that when you get it, it's like, man, I didn't even ask where the headlights are on this thing. How do I turn on the headlights on this? So I know what you mean.
Sometimes you've had the car for a year and then you realize where the lock the window switch is.
That's a good point.
I actually
I didn't know I could do this.
Very recently. So we have a fairly new car. I didn't realize very recently I got pulled over by the cops and they were like, "Did you know your lights aren't on?" I was like, nope, I did not know that. So I don't know how long I've been driving at night with my lights not on. I mean, because it's you got the street lights. I wasn't like in a desolate area or anything, so I had plenty of street lights. I had no idea, and that's why. I mean, thank God he didn't give me a ticket and all that stuff. But I was just like, I had no idea.
Have you found that same thing happen with like your brew equipment? Have you been like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I could do this?
I mean, every brew day, you kind of try and take as many little notes and notice as many things that you can keep consistent or you can predict.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I mean, from the smallest thing, like if my trusty thermometer breaks on a brew day, how am I going to figure out how to accurately read temperatures? Yeah. Like it could be as small as that to just having a revolution of, I can bypass this step and it'll actually be better for the beer. And I never would have thought to do it that way, but I have the equipment to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think that journey is ended. And then depending on the type of beer you're making, some of them require some pretty specific processes that if we don't have the equipment that most people are using for it, you kind of have to dig in and figure out how you're going to replicate that.
Did you guys? Is it all new equipment when you guys open?
No.
Not a chance.
Not all.
Our brew system is one, I guess I designed for the most part, and it's very manual. We don't have any controls back
steering.
there.
Right.
It's definitely Will puts his love into it and makes sure it's going in the right direction. But yeah, we don't have any real control other than our glycol system is really the only actual control is that we have. The control box.
So you have brew experience as well as the owner.
A little bit. I have never worked at a brewery. I did some home brewing for a while. Wasn't great at it. It was all extract brewing, but never.
Hey, nothing wrong
That's
with
why-
that. Hey,
that's
that's,
why
that's
Will
how I
is here.
started.
Never made it to the full mash, but did some home brewing, and then my uncle has a brewery in Colorado, and so I spent some time with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Learned on his system. He has a 12 barrel system in Colorado, so I learned on that system, and that's kind of how I modeled our system off that, for better or for worse.
What brewery is it?
It's called Horsefly Brewing.
Horsefly Brewing?
It's in Montrose, Colorado.
Cool.
On the western slope.
Go visit.
So here we are. Obviously, I can guess, but there might be more to it. But the name Beachfly, physically, you can't get much closer to the waves right now.
Right out the window.
I mean, like, you can look straight out the window and there's the beach. So I'm assuming that's why beach is in the name. So what is a beach fly for our folks who don't live near the beach?
The name came from, again, my uncle has a brewery in Colorado called Horsefly, and he's been my mentor. He's the one that pushed me to open a brewery in Florida. I was kind of bored in Colorado working for a corporation. Says you have some brew experience.
I can relate.
And my mom was living in Florida. He's like, that place where your mom lives, they could use another brewery, especially with someone that has some Colorado beer knowledge. So he pushed me to come out here, and he's been my mentor. And
so you moved out here to open
here to open this brewery.
Wow,
yes.
Cool, man.
So knew no one other than my mother. And then, so he's been my mentor. We were out running around looking at places and buildings and coming up with a business plan. And he says, what are you going to call this place? And I said, well, I hadn't really thought about that. And his wife goes, well, if you're the beach version of Horsefly, why don't you just be Beachfly? I'm like, sounds like a good name to me.
Good name as any.
It's kind of a,
cool story.
it's kind of a beach version of a barfly, and that's kind of what we want to be if we're going to cross the street from the beach.
So you're almost like their sister brewery in a loose way. I guess.
So we call them our brother brewery because it's my mom's brother, and we're their sister brewery.
Oh, that's funny.
You moved here specifically for beer, which, I mean, I will say that takes some guts there to just say, that sounds like a great plan.
It's a beautiful thing. If
move. Oh, it's gorgeous. I mean, if I was not married, I'm in. It's like I'll go start a brewery, I think I would honestly rather do this because I talk a lot, and so that's something that seems to be in my wheelhouse. How did you guys meet? So you knew nobody when you got here, or did you know him when you got here?
No, I knew no one. I brought a buddy of mine from Colorado that was a home brewer looking to go pro. And then, like I said earlier, our build out was 15 plus months. He was also a former engineer from a large corporation, made a lot of money, and was kind of getting sick of waiting with a small paycheck.
Yeah.
He
said
about
bye.
9 months in, there was still no end in sight. And he kind of was like, I got to go. I got to go do something else. Coincidentally, Will had moved back here from Denver. Will grew up here, back here from Denver, and was flying at breweries. And I got to know all the other breweries in the build-out phase. Like, I'd go hang out there, talk to them, meet them at beer fests. Bug Nutties, they were in Merritt Island. They're now in Cocoa Village. They told Will that we don't have any room for a brewer, but we heard this rumor that there's this brewery in Indian Harbor Beach. You should go check them out. And so he hit me up on Facebook, and I said, well, right now I got a brewer. A few weeks later, my brewer said, I'm taking off.
So about that, having a brewer, are you still in the
Jake.
market?
Right.
So then I reached out to Will and I said, well, you still interested in being a brewer? And he said, yeah. And so we sat in the brewery and on the couch back here and chatted for almost 2 hours about my vision and what I want the brewery to be and what Will wants in his job of being a brewer and his vision in beer, and our styles meshed, our visions kind of meshed. We actually have very similar beer taste, which helped, so we're not...
I gave you a bottle.
And I said, do you have any homebrew left? I'd like to taste it. And he ran home, got a bottle for me, and I took it to my mom / business partner. We cracked it open that night over dinner, and my mom likes beer. But she's more like an English beer drinker. This is a Saison, her style, but she goes, this is incredible. So I called him the next day and said, we'd like to hire you. I don't know when we're going to open, but we'll hire you part-time to do some recipe development, and then we'll see where we go from there. And been working together ever since.
That's so funny. I completely was expecting you to say that you brought him with you. Just the fact that you're both from Colorado. Because I don't know a ton of people from Colorado.
We were in Colorado at the same time.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's
coincidence.
there's a lot of people in Colorado.
Yeah.
So
is that near Denver?
A lot of breweries there too.
Yeah.
So when I was out in Colorado, I lived about an hour south of Denver. Will lived in Denver, and then my uncle's brewery is like on the western side, so that's the opposite side of the state. It's about 5-6 hours away.
Pretty far spread out. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I would just spend a week or two at my uncle's brewery at a time. Never I didn't live there and work there for months or anything. It just was, I just go there, shadow him.
Yeah.
Learn his process, learn his system, and then kind of come home, do some research on, is that the best way to do it? No, but it's an economical way of doing it. So
you do what works. Now that you've had the year here, we've got the name Beachfly because obviously barflies, and also using a variation of your uncle's brewery name. That's really awesome to hear. What's the history of the building before you guys had it? Was it a J.C. Penney's? What was this building before?
It's a very small J.C. Penney.
Well, very very niche sized J.C. Penney. But yeah, so what was this building, if you know, before?
So we're on the corner of 818 and O'Galley, an old building, and it's most famous for being the Purple Porpoise. It's been many things before that, many things since that, but there's the Purple Porpoise, I think, through most of the 90s and most of the early 2000s, which before I got here, but from what I've been told, was kind of a cool little sports bar where sometimes they would put a beach in the middle of the bar and
like a
tables.
billiards bar, like a small restaurant, dive bar kind of thing.
What do you mean they would put a beach in the middle? Like
they would just
pour
bring
a bunch
in
of sand?
sand in the middle of the bar
Yeah.
just for like a weekend.
That sounds messy.
A bunch of the kids I grew up with worked there, and so when I tell them that I'm working here now, they just can't imagine a brewery in this building.
Really? That's
because
pretty
it's. I mean, that's the other thing is we get people in who had spent quality time at the Purple Porpoise.
And we like to, I mean, a lot of our beer names, we try to pay tribute to the building, pay tribute to the area we live in. So, like, we do have a Purple Porpoise Pale Ale. We're across the street from Canova Beach, which is the dog beach, local dog beach here. So we have a Canova Sunrise Red. Our flagship IPA is IHBPA for Indian Harbor Beach Pale Ale.
Yeah.
So I'm not from the area, but I understand the roots of the area. Will is, and he kind of helps me make sure that we're staying true to this area and to the locals.
That's cool.
And it's kind of funny. So I grew up not even far from here. I'm from Palm Bay originally, so I grew up in the area, but not here. I mean, it takes 10 minutes to drive here from Palm Bay.
It's all Melbourne in my brain.
Exactly. So they're all this. It's really weird because it's all the same little area. Palm Bay, Melbourne. I just kind of consider it all the same. But on that same note, as a kid, I didn't go to the beach very often. During the summer we'd go to like Indy Atlantic and dump a bunch of quarters in the pay meter, and when the quarters ran out, you went back home. That was pretty much my beach experience. So I didn't really eat at a lot of restaurants. Well, I definitely wasn't drinking beer back then. But so things like that, I had very little until I was an adult, any real beachside food or drink or anything like that. So it is kind of neat that it's its own kind of
like an ecosystem.
Vibe. Yeah, exactly. It's its own ecosystem. It's its own, even though it's so close. So, I remember the few times, I don't know exactly why as a kid, but I remember this building was called the Purple Porpoise, and it was purple on the outside.
Yeah, same here. I never went to the Purple Porpoise, but it was kind of iconic in this area, though.
Yeah, I remember the name growing up. It's kind of a fun thing to say and all that stuff. And then if you would ask me 3 years ago if it was open or not. I couldn't have told you if Purple Porpoise was open or not. I wouldn't have had any idea. I was just like, I know exactly where it was located.
Yeah.
But I'd never, come here. So it's kind of neat that this exists here, and a lot of people didn't know it. So, you were told by your uncle that, hey, you need to go to Florida because they need some breweries down there, which I'm always happy to get another brewery in the area. I mean, there are a lot of great breweries popping up in this area, which is really great because I have a podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast and you have a brewery, come on and hit me up on Facebook, and I'll be glad to interview you.
It was a desert though here, brewing desert. Charlie and Jake's was that.
Charlie and Jake's was like the first game in
Florida
town.
beer.
Yeah, I mean, and Florida.
Indian River Beverage Company.
Indian River,
Yeah,
and they weren't really even a brewery. They were like a conglomerate.
Exactly.
They bought out a bunch of small breweries throughout the state.
Yeah, so it's very strange, in a good way, how just in the last few years, beer has kind of exploded on the scene.
Awesome.
When I first started drinking beer, it was always, all of the big guys, and that's all there was. And I did talk about my first step into craft breweries. I talked to Dave about this. I don't know if you guys, and I actually saw it the other day and almost bought one because I was editing that big old jug of Mississippi Mud.
Oh yeah,
you know that one?
Classic.
I forgot where I was. I think maybe at ABC the other day, and I looked at it because I just started editing that episode, and I was like this close. I was like,
hey, where did you see it at ABC? I actually haven't seen that in forever.
It was at ABC, and I was looking, and I had my hand on. I was like, no, I can't.
Why?
You should bring a bottle of it to every interview and make everyone taste your first craft beer.
This is one of my first ever craft beers.
Yeah.
There you go. So on that note, you guys, I guess we'll start with Zach. What was put your toe into the water with craft beer?
For me, I guess it was in college and didn't want to go to the frat parties. So there was a really nice beer bar in Purdue. Purdue's where I went. So downtown Lafayette, there was a really nice beer bar called Chumley's.
We have a Chumley's.
There is a Chumley's here in Melbourne. They actually have a very similar logo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I thought when I moved here, I was like, "Are you affiliated with the Indiana Chumley's?" And they said, "We don't know what you're talking about." But they would have Thursday nights. They'd call it Schooner Night, and they'd buy this big ass glass 32-ounce schooner, and all their craft beers were half price. So every Thursday, I'm an Alpha King, which is a very popular IPA in Indiana. It's my favorite beer, and Two Hearted Ale. I just go there and just drink those all night. And that's how I kind of started loving beer, and then I moved to Colorado, and it's really easy to get into beer out there.
It's not hard at all. I mean, even the first time I went to Colorado, I didn't really know anything about beer. So it's just kind of funny that was probably a lot of that, especially like New Belgium, which now they've recently decided to sell, but that's a whole nother story. But I mean, New Belgium's been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great though.
Yeah, they're very good beer, and I had no idea about anything about beer. And so the first time I ever went to Colorado, I was surrounded by greatness as far as beer goes. I was just oblivious, like, yeah, I'll take a Coors because I'm in the Rocky Mountains. Let's have a Coors.
They do taste good at the brewery.
What a waste.
They do, and I've done that tour a few times over the years. Same thing. I lived in St. Louis for a few years.
Oh, yeah.
So every time the family or friends would come up from Florida or wherever, it's like, oh, looks like we're doing the Anheuser-Busch tour. So that was just kind of one of the things you do when you go into the area.
Oh, I was just gonna say, but before we move on, you mentioned Bell's Two Hearted Ale. That my wife's from Michigan. We love Bell's. They're so amazing. But me and a couple of my friends, Matt and Billy, when we first got into craft beer, 10 years ago, maybe longer actually. We did a beer of the month club. We get 6-packs. There was this place called the Flying Corkscrew that used to be in downtown Melbourne.
Oh yeah.
Remember that place?
A long time ago. That's where I got my first pumpkin beer. We've talked about.
Yeah.
What is it? The Headless Horseman had a pumpkin.
Oh yeah.
Shipyard.
Shipyard.
That was the first ever pumpkin beer I had.
Well, the guy Ken, the owner, he was a cool guy. He actually didn't know anything about craft beer really. He was more of a wine guy, but he sold us these 6-packs. The first one we tasted it together, and we were like, oh, we're gonna take notes. And Bell's Two Hearted Ale was one of them, and all three of us couldn't even finish. We were like, this is poison. This is disgusting. And now I look back, I'm like, it's like the standard for that style of IPA. I mean, they're so good. It's just funny when you first start. But that's kind of interesting that you thought it was great right from the get go. So you must have you got that hophead palate, I guess.
Yeah. and because I have to steal Dave from time to time for these, I actually have to buy his wife some of that exact style of beer. So I'll be in her good graces, so she won't hate me. So
one of those mini kegs.
Oh, that's good. Do they have that on the 200?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, I didn't know
Note
that.
to self. There you
Note
go.
to self.
If I can find them, then I guess
I'm not gonna complain.
Merry Christmas. No, you're not allowed to have any. That's not for
Just
you.
for her.
That is just for her. Will, what was your first foray into the craft beer?
I started home brewing pretty soon after I turned 21. So my first craft beer that I paid
He
for
was
legally was actually at the World of Beer that's still up in the Avenues.
Okay.
But that was the Sierra Nevada Optimum whole cone double IPA, melt your teeth off kind of.
I remember that.
So you jumped into the deep end of the pool.
Well, I already knew that there were things that I liked.
Gotcha.
And what's interesting is that being a starving artist college student, I couldn't afford to go drink craft beer at World of Beer. So I actually got into home brewing because a buddy of mine, when I would geek out about all these cool beers and flavors and all this stuff you could do, he actually gave me the book, How to Brew. And he said, you can make that stuff at home. And I'd never heard that in my life. Beer comes from a store was my mentality.
Milk comes from cow,
and
beer comes from store.
I made my first beer with him, and we fermented it in a plastic bucket in his house in Florida in the summer, and it by most standards gross. And we drank all of it. We thought it was amazing. I got the bucket. We did a Newcastle clone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it tasted kind of like beer, and we were like, "This is amazing." But from that point on, I was avidly home brewing.
Was that an extract, that first one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was absolutely. Yeah. There's the same guy that kind of got me down this whole path. He's a culinary. That's sort of his forte. So he actually shows up. I think it's going to be another annual thing for each one of Beachfly's, either the grand opening last year or the anniversary party this year. He shows up with his whole smoker trailer, and he does a whole pig out in the parking lot.
No way, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we do kind of a luau theme. So he's going to smoke the whole pig,
gosh,
and
I
we'll have that.
Dude, I should have eaten breakfast.
For-
I'm like starving right now.
For
It's
the
like, I could
event.
eat a whole
so
pig right
hungry.
now.
But yeah, basically, I caught the bug that way, and it was cheaper for me to make craft beer than to buy it. And so that just kind of
suited for economical
it
purposes.
just sent me down this path, and I had a job where I was able to kind of do some research on the side, and I just never really stopped. So I eventually turned this bug into a hobby, into a career.
Did you slowly build a
but-
system at your house?
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean as cheap as possible. My
Yeah.
first mash tun was a water cooler that a local gym near me in Tampa had left outside for like 3 weeks. I was like, I guess they're not going to use it. I took it home. Actually,
I hope you sterilized that.
my then girlfriend, my wife now,
He used bleach.
she grabbed it for me and brought it home. She knew how much I was bugging out about the thing, and she was like, "I think this is what you need." I scrubbed it as hard as I can, and that was my mash tun for 3 years.
And that was the day he actually proposed to her. He knew
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, right.
He was like, you know what? Now I know.
Yeah, she got me my first keg setup and all this
Wow,
stuff.
that's
She
cool.
facilitated all of this.
So if
takes a village.
if for some reason she's like, you're at the brewery way too much, he's
Right.
like, really, it's your fault.
Yeah,
I mean,
I had no choice.
You made me do
you
this.
did this to me.
But it was cool. So I started homebrewing about a year before we actually got married, and my goal for our wedding was to make all the beer for the wedding. I did that. I ended up brewing about 110 gallons of beer in my tiny little setup, and kegging and
God.
bottling all of it. And my only rule for the people showing up was there's no open bar, but I have cider, I have beer, I have all
Open
this stuff.
taps.
And then her uncle, classic, he showed up and he's hiding in the corner with a 6-pack of Natty Light, and I was like, you know what, I appreciate that. You do you.
I mean, I would
Well, I
rather
would've kicked his ass
I
out,
would
man.
rather him drink his Natty Light
Mhm.
than to take a sip of mine and pour it out or
Right.
something. Like when I
Yeah,
know
I guess that's
I
true.
know the few times that I've I've brewed beer, I've had mixed results. I mean, I also made a Newcastle knockoff from an extract. I called it nuked asshole because it didn't taste too good. But I don't know what I did wrong there. But
So
yeah,
clever.
that one didn't. I've been known to be clever. But yeah, so that one didn't turn out too well. I've dabbled. Actually, for my 15th anniversary, I actually had a party up at a local brewery here, and I got to help brew one of the beers that was served there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so me and my wife, we were in there, kind of, mostly just raking grain into a garbage can. Someone needed to do it, and that was us that day.
Isn't that it? Like being a brewer is being a janitor. Right?
Exactly.
I mean,
and I was, yeah, that's exactly what they said in the previous interview, that as far as brewing, you're more a custodian or a janitor than a brewer. Would you guys argue with that? Agree with that? What's your thought there?
It's definitely the truth. Some people like the term glorified janitor. At the end of the day, beer has everything it needs to make itself. But if you want to make it do what you want it to do, you have to facilitate it. And that means cleaning things the right way.
Sterilizing.
Yeah.
So instead of brewmaster, you're broom master.
Right.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
I like, yeast make beer, brewers make yeast food, and just babysit the rest of the process.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
You just got to feed the baby.
So you're a janitor and a babysitter,
Mhm.
and and then you get to drink some beer once in a while.
Right.
Can I ask him a question? Am I allowed to?
You're not allowed to say it. You're cut off. You're almost done with your word rations for the day.
I know. I use them up
use
so
them
quick,
wisely.
man, I'm
Textbook.
bad. I feel like you guys have like a real regular type of vibe. Like the first time I came here actually was to meet up with. You guys know Eric McKinley? You know Eric?
Oh, yeah.
CrossFit.
He
He owns the CrossFit gym. Yeah.
Yeah, he comes. I know he comes. I think at least once a week or something. I met him.
He was here like 2 days
He
ago
hangs
for
out.
sure.
So
he used to run a beach boot camp on Sundays.
That's right.
Where we'd go do the boot camp on the mornings and come here for beer afterwards.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get that going again 2020.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, what percentage of customers do you feel like are regulars versus just walk-ins that haven't ever been here before? Not much, at least.
We don't have like hard numbers.
You don't
on
ask
that.
every person.
You don't have an Excel spreadsheet on the computer over there?
I got a lot of Excel spreadsheets, but not that specific number. It's probably 50 to 60% are local people that live on the island or something like that.
That's pretty cool.
Only being here for a year so far, we definitely noticed the seasonal changes in our crowd, and we said bye to all our snowbirds when they went home, and now we're excited to bring them all back, because it was a relationship for the first half that we were open that we really got close to these people, and then they said their farewells.
They probably can't wait to come.
And we've got our regulars that show up on a pretty consistent basis. And then we still get a lot of people who show up and they say, I had no idea you guys were here. Like, I didn't know this was going on. Some of our fans from Sebastian and Vero Beach will come up every once in a while. But after we get through the first whole year, we'll probably know better who we can expect to see at what different
who
times.
you can trust.
Yeah, well, and it's just interesting. And there's also a lot of new places opening up on the beach, and I know the beachside people. They like to go out and do stuff, but they like to do the new stuff, and then after they do the new stuff, they don't really like to travel very far.
Oh yeah.
So it is interesting to see what our regulars, regulars are. Yeah,
and not to necessarily plug other businesses, but you're actually in a really good spot. I mean, a stone's throw away, you've got two kind of iconic area places. You've got Lou's Blues just right over there, which I mean, that place has been there. They've been doing their thing for a long time. And then you've got Coasters just across the street, and they're not. Well, Dave said that at one point they were a brewery, but now they're just a place if you want to get a cool beer from wherever. So I mean, they're a really cool beer place.
Coasters is great. I love they just have such a good focus on German beers. There's not a lot of places that really do that.
I love the Belgian Fest when they do the Belgian Fest.
Belgian Fest is
that's my jam.
They're a
so
cool place.
For a little while there, a few years ago, like the Belgian quad was just that was my jam for the longest time.
Love
so
a good quad.
I always love that. But you're actually in a really good location for people who like beer. I mean, or just like enjoying themselves,
just being happy.
And it's three different kind of, or I guess there's a kind of conglomerate. So like the Lou's Blues would be more of the, hey, if you just want to hang out, have live music, drink, a Budweiser, then that's kind of a cool crowd right there. And then of course, you come here if you want something that's made on the premises. It's right there. It's local. You want to support small business. That's a great place. Right here.
You're the only brewery on this part of Beachside, at least, right?
Yes.
Indian Harbor, Satellite.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one just up the street, but it's literally
over the bridge.
There's literally
the
street goes over a body of water, So I mean, there's definitely some distance there, but it is kind of funny. It's like, oh, you mean the one just up the street? Like, no, I mean,
That doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
over that mountain.
That mountain.
It's on another landmass,
point
but
in Florida.
yeah, exactly on another landmass, but it is, I guess, technically up the street. Just like anything, say you live in Miami, anything in Maine is just up I-95. So
That's true.
It's just up the street.
It's a straight shot.
We're on the same street as that other place, so yeah, so they're just up the street. So you guys have been doing this for about a year. I know you've had some homebrew experience, and then also Will has worked in other breweries, and we'll get back to that. So roughly how long? I guess we'll once again, we'll defer to Will here. So how long have you been doing the beer thing?
That very first homebrew that I did was in 2013. So I actually haven't been in the game for a very long time, but I've put a lot of time in.
Yeah, so the hours, the total number of hours. So if it takes you 10 years to get 100 hours, or if it takes you 1 year to get 100 hours,
right,
it's still 100 hours. So
yeah, and it's been cool to see the difference, not only between I did no brewing here when I grew up here. Started all that in Tampa, and the Tampa St. Pete scene was probably one of the big catalysts for my interest in beer with the behemoth like Cigar City out there,
and in the state really.
Yeah, and it was easy to get good beer, and now
place.
they're really kind of leading. I personally think leading the trend in Florida for how to do a beer town. And then
I got a lot of miles to put on the car because that's some of my next
Absolutely.
area that I got to
you
go
gotta
to.
And you couldn't possibly. You
Hit
probably
off,
couldn't get it all. We used to say that in Denver because people would show up and they'd, I want to do this. And it's like, find something good near you and don't waste all your time in the car because you're never going to catch up.
Well, I mean, my issue is I literally have to bring this to people. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, so I'm going to, obviously I like beer, but yeah, I'm going to have to put miles on the car just so I can get these good interviews.
The title of the podcast doesn't make sense if you're not.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I say at the beginning of the episode, I'm not condoning drinking and driving. It's just I'm going to be driving. I have an RV, so I'm going to hop in my RV. I'm going to go to a campground, probably near one of those breweries or a few of those breweries, spend like a couple of weeks there, get all the interviews set up, and then I'm going to interview them. So I am drinking and I'm driving. So I'm not a
responsible.
Just not in that order.
Well, I was in St. Louis and I did 2 interviews and I Ubered it. And by the way, Uber, if you're listening, I would love to have you as a sponsor as well. Maybe give me the Uber black card where I can ride anywhere for free. I mean, that would be, I don't know if it's a thing, but how cool would that be? Like, boom, unlimited Ubers. I would have
one can dream.
I would call Uber to take me to my mailbox if I had an Uber kind of black card where I get
that poor guy. Ubers. How's that guy getting paid?
That's not my problem.
That's not my problem.
They would revoke it the first week I
got
had
Joe
it.
again. Dang it!
Track it.
Like, can you just take me to my mailbox? Which I know I can throw a stone to it from here, but hey, black card. So now that we've kind of gone over your history, we're going to go to you. So how long have you been brewing?
First homebrew was 2009. Brewed for 3 or 4 years, and then hung up the pails and gave them to a buddy that was still home brewing, and decided to focus my efforts on just going to craft beer and breweries and learning a little more about different styles rather than trying to replicate.
That's how I am. Yeah.
So you mentioned doing extract, and this is kind of for everybody involved. Was it just whatever extracts you get, or did anyone do the Mr. Beer?
No.
Just
don't shake it.
It's so bad.
That was my favorite. That's how I started. Someone got me the Mr. Beer kit, which was awesome. It's this little, cute little barrel shaped thing. I still think it's a good. If you're interested in brewing,
porous plastic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
doesn't go well with beer.
It's not going to be a showroom quality product, but that right there gives you a realistic, very small scale. If you're like, man, brewing beer would be awesome. And you do that, and you're like, well, if you say, well, this sucks, well, then it's good that you didn't spend some money on some real equipment.
I don't know. I just feel like you can spend not that much more and get way better quality equipment.
Well, especially these days. I think what's nice about the Mr. Beer is I'd wager that a pretty high percentage of the people that are making craft beer around the country now started their interest with the Mr. Beer kit as a present or as a gift.
That's how I started.
But you are right. I mean, if you're going to jump into it now, the equipment and the ingredients and you can get it all online.
Totally.
It's way too easy to make great beer.
You can get a winemaking kit with a glass carboy, a bucket, and
Everything
the
you need
airlock
right there.
for like $80 or less. I mean, it's not that
Yeah.
bad. Or used, go on Craigslist.
Yeah,
Right.
There's always Craigslist for things.
People always try brewing and they realize it's work, and then they sell their equipment. So.
Well, that's the thing that people don't realize too. So obviously, there's a lot of work, but if you're making 10 gallons of beer, it is I'm not gonna say no harder or no easier, but it's not an equal. So like 100 gallons of beer is not 10 times harder than 10 gallons. So
it's not. Yeah, it's not
because 10 gallons.
scale.
It's not a slight. It's not even. So I mean, if you're making 10 gallons of beer, you can make 20 gallons of beer. With the effort is for amounts like that. There's very little difference. I would say. Would you guys agree that making a large and obviously I'm not talking about 100,000 barrels a year kind of thing. I'm talking.
Sure. Then you're changing. Once you have to change to different equipment, then that's probably
right. Exactly. So,
changes,
but would you argue, or would you guys agree? I mean, either way, that 10 gallons and 100 gallons, how much difference is there in effort?
So making beer is a process that doesn't really change. So whether you're talking very, very largest breweries down to someone doing 5 gallons at home, you still have to do the same thing with the same ingredients. But equipment changes, and then volume of ingredients changes, and that's where you get potentially more time or more work. But yeah, absolutely. If you
pouring a packet of hops into
pots
quicker than
exactly
shoveling.
But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to make a beer without going through those steps, which you have to learn even if you're doing 1 gallon.
And the amount of time it has to be at that temperature is exactly the same. So,
and people still seem to be surprised on a somewhat regular basis that you can't drink the beer the day you make it. So there's you can.
I mean, yeah, that's called syrup.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not beer yet.
So yeah, I think it's definitely the truth. Yeah, it's hard to say that it's not more work because it's more heavy lifting, more dangerous equipment, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're essentially still doing the same thing. And even if you're doing extract brewing, you still have to control enough about it to make a drinkable beer that you're gonna learn what commercial breweries are having to deal with as well.
Well, and I would say, just from my own experience, when the equipment, like you said, it's more dangerous equipment, but then there's a trade-off where it's made for that, so it's better. So the little pot that I had that I put on my stove, and my stove could barely bring it to a boil. Like as soon as I lift the lid, the boil goes away. That kind of stuff. Then you're like, oh, you want to boil? 6 minutes later, you're like, how did you? So those are the things where it's like it gets more dangerous and stuff. But then some of the things, because you have a purpose-built tool, it seems to make it.
Right.
Not obviously not the whole process, but certain parts it does make it easier. Like when you're using, you mentioned, the way you chill stuff. It's like you can cool your beer down a lot quicker than I could. Me running it through my hose, through a little copper coil.
That's what we did with Crane Creek. It was
that takes forever, and you probably wasted. Like you could fill a pool with the water that's coming out of the end.
Yeah, it's funny. The smaller shop that I worked for in Denver was a nano brewery, a homebrew retail shop, and a brew on premise location. Mm-hmm. So we dealt a lot with education, and then also kind of the latest and the greatest in the homebrewing equipment stuff. And it seemed that way for a long time that I was realizing that most of the old school homebrewing equipment is just not ideal for making beer in most ways. These days, however, they're making that same equipment that we use on a, like a
more manageable size.
Yeah, like a model train scale. And so you have all of that efficiency too. Obviously it'll cost a little more, but you can be making 5 gallons of beer and you could have more control than most of the commercial breweries in your area these days.
That's funny. Have you seen those like all-in-one?
Oh yeah.
That seems odd to me.
No,
Are they legit?
Yeah, because they're taking that same process
crazy.
And they're simplifying it. They're simplifying cleaning it. They're making it more consistent, which those options weren't there for a long time.
Have you guys ever thought of getting one of those to do like pilot batches or something?
I'm gonna get one for myself.
They're kind of affordable. Some of them, they're not like
$300 or something for a whole all-in-one, all-grain brew system.
And like he said, the reason he really got into beer is because it's more economical than buying it elsewhere. So it's like,
well, now you got two going. It's economical and it's less time consuming,
right.
Less sanitization and stuff.
Exactly.
Sounds like a win-win.
You know,
That's
the classic glass carboy has been a double-edged sword for a long time.
Oh,
You
yeah.
see pictures of people slicing their hands open and all this, but now you can get these stainless steel fermenter buckets that you can pressurize. You can
Get out
you
of
can
here.
get a little homebrew sized glycol chiller in them and everything.
Crazy.
It's nuts.
It seems less fun to me though. I like you just look at it. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess it's the difference between, like, I don't know, picking crops by hand and then just having this giant tractor go out and gather it. You had like 50 people out there going, pick, and they could do a fraction of what this thing could do in 1 hour
Yeah,
in an entire day. So I mean, so
with one dude running it.
the process is good. So the next thing I was going to ask. So now that you've been open for a year, you have a good sample size of what's happened, what you've sold, how much you've sold of this one, those kind of things. So and we're going to try some beers really shortly here, but really quick, what is if I've never been to your brewery before and I said, hey, what's your number one beer? I want to try it. What's that beer?
Our number one seller, most popular beer that our regulars come in for week after week is the IHBPA. It's our core IPA. We're trying to blend Colorado style IPAs with what we kind of call Florida style IPAs, so kind of a piney based IPA with a little more citrus floral based IPA. We're trying to bring those two worlds together. That's definitely our best seller month in, month out.
You say IHB as in Indian Harbor Beach?
Indian Harbor Beach Pale Ale. So yes.
Nice.
But you said earlier that the New England one is actually doing best currently as a season.
Yeah, so we just released a New England IPA 2 weeks ago, and that's been selling like gangbusters the last 2 weeks. It's definitely been our biggest seller the last 2 weeks. But we kind of do see that. We try to release a beer every week or so.
Okay.
Thursdays are our beer release days, and we do a lot of small pilot batches, experimental stuff, or we'll take one of our core beers and then try to
tweak it a little
tweak
bit.
it with changing the yeast or the fruit, adding some fruit to it. And a lot of those will be what we release on Thursday. And then when we have a seasonal, we'll release those on Thursdays as well. So we always see the first couple weeks that we have a seasonal, or a lot of our small batch things we sell out in 3 days, 4 days.
Oh, wow.
But we only have 5 to 10 gallons of those.
Still, I mean, if it moves that quick, that's nice.
So we always see our releases, because we do have this Thursday release, always the first week to 2 weeks of anything is always real high. Our New England is a little higher than even our other highest beers we've ever had. So
you weren't expecting it to do as well as it did.
we sort of did expect it. The New England IPA is the trendiest beer right now, so we kind of
it's worth noting the name for that reason.
Yeah.
Too.
So our New England
people know what it is.
Our New England IPA right now is it's part of we're calling it our Snowbird series.
Nice.
So we call it Crossbill, which is a snowbird that's a New England beer that comes down to Florida in the winter, and so as do New England IPAs right now, and some other snowboards.
So is that going to be a seasonal beer? Is that the kind of the projected course? Unless it just sells so well that you just keep it forever.
The Snowbird series, in theory, we were going to have a series of that, so we'll have a few different versions of New England IPAs coming out. Never at the same time, but probably throughout the rest of the winter, we'll have different New England IPAs with different hops, different ways to do that.
So you get some variety, but you still get to give the people what they want.
But they all
be style specific.
will either be named after a classic snowbird or a little more Florida personalized snowbird. Those names will be coming out here soon.
So we've kind of talked about this previously, Dave and I, where we live in Florida. Think that's always sunny in Florida kind of thing. And I mean, today would be a cold day, considered a cold day. It's probably sitting in the 60s right now.
Everybody's worried.
So the main thing, the reason I'm kind of bringing up the weather and all that stuff is because of that. It seems like a lot of the darker beers kind of get thrown by the wayside. Not a lot of people make them. Like a lot of people make a lot of lighter, fruity, Florida. When you think Florida beers, what's your opinion on kind of having a darker, thicker, heartier beer? And do you guys have one?
So when we kind of started, Will and I talked about kind of the concept of the beer, and or we just have all rotationals or have some core beers. And we landed on we'd have 6 core beers, and they kind of would traverse what we think craft beer is. So, you have your light Kolsch style, your malty beer, your just kind of standard pale ale, your hoppy beer, and then we also want to make sure we had a really good dark beer, either a stout or a porter. The other side of that is that we also, being across the street from the beach, wanted to make sure that all of our beers, especially our core ones, are drinkable on a hot day on the beach.
That's
and
smart
so
too.
Will came to me when we were kind of mapping out these 6 core beers, and he said, "There's this style called the Extra Foreign Stout." For an extra stout. I always mess that up. For an extra stout.
It's really
all the words are there.
that tastes super foreign to me.
I'd say extra foreign.
He said it has a lot of history in the Caribbean. It originally was made in the UK and shipped down to the Caribbean for the people living down there. And basically what they did is they took their regular stouts and they added a little more hop and dried it out a little bit so that would travel a little better, be a little higher alcohol and a little easier to drink. So we went and bought 6 or 7 different versions of that and kind of picked them all apart and mashed what we liked of those styles into what our extra foreign stout. For an extra stout. It's called Scallywag. So that's our dark beer, our stout that we always keep on. It's one, it's definitely a crowd favorite that any of our regulars that like the dark stouts. So we always keep that on, and we try to have another darker beer on when we can. So right now we don't have one on, but we have a strong Belgian ale that will be coming out that kind of will be replacing that.
Cool.
We do have the Brutal on too.
And then we have a black IPA as well. So we try to keep 1 to 2 darker beers on as well.
Have you had any beers that you were? We'll do both sides of this. So one that you thought like, oh man, this one's probably not going to do too well, and it did amazing, or vice versa. One you're like, man, I think we nailed it. We just hit the holy grail of beer, and it just kind of got a lackluster performance, or maybe not even lackluster, but not what you thought as far as a reception from the people.
I mean, in general, I think with the size system we have and how much beer we're pushing, there's not a whole lot of drastic differences in that sense. But like our St. Patrick's Day Irish Dry Stout was a phenomenal beer, but it just really didn't move that much. And the people that would come in and drink it kind of throughout would all give us pretty great feedback about it, but it just wasn't a whole lot of people going for that style.
Getting to try it to begin
so
with.
that was probably the biggest thing, and
so it was a surprise more than anything. So good beer, just the reception.
I don't think there's been anything necessarily that we released that people had an opposite reaction than what we expected. Not that I can remember.
Yeah, we're not trying to make bad beers.
Well, I don't think a lot of breweries are going for that particular angle. That seems like a very small niche environment. The bad beer brewery. That doesn't seem like something that would go. So when you have a beer like that, you decide, hey, this was an amazing beer. The people who drink it, that's all they drink. That is their favorite beer. They won't drink anything else. Not that they won't drink anything else, but that's what they drink. How does one go about that when you kind of adjust for that?
When we have beers like that, we'll take a break from doing that style of beer for a little while, and then next March, April, if we want to do another Irish stout kind of for holidays or something like that, we'll probably do a smaller batch, do it on our pilot system. Potentially, with that beer, what we did too is we pulled a couple kegs off and we'd dose them with some coconut or chocolate, and those things kind of help move. So that we'd kind of have the planning of, if we're gonna do a bigger batch, we'll split it into smaller. We'll do a base beer and then we'll split it into smaller versions that we can, with a little more forethought on how we're going to change them to just kind of keep the diversity in our portfolio.
Because anything new basically sells well
at the beginning.
Yeah. So if you chop it up into little bits and kind of have different versions,
right? Well, and
I want to try this one. I haven't had that yet.
That also leads into I'm sure a lot of breweries are dealing with storage issues. So one of our biggest strengths is that we do have the ability to go up to a 7-barrel batch of something that we don't want to be making all the time because it's moving fast. And the smallest batch we can do is 5 gallons.
That was literally the next question I was going to ask. Like, where?
So we can land almost wherever we need to in between, but it'll be making a note like, hey, that St. Patrick's Day beer made it way past St. Patrick's Day. Maybe we'll do a 10-gallon batch of that next year.
Yeah. And how much did you do on that particular?
That was a 4-barrel batch, so it was 124 gallons.
Okay, and it took a while to get through that beer.
Yeah, right. And we try with so we have 12 taps for our regular beers, and that's the 6 core and then 6 kind of seasonal rotational. So with those 6 seasonal, we try and hit as many different styles and marks as we can, also trying to make sure that whatever it is sells. So usually 1 or 2 of those are some other form of IPA, just because they move nicely. And then beyond that, we try and get something in the fruity or sour range, and then something in the sort of malt forward range, or something in the higher alcohol range, and they kind of jump around that way. Depending on what we've got on already, maybe a bigger batch of Irish Stout would be better if we didn't already have another English mild on.
Gotcha. It sounds like there's a lot of logistics involved in this, because you think last year was your first year of running this place, so maybe your customer base wasn't exactly what it is going to be this year. So right. It could be that you can't walk in here on St. Patty's Day. It might be like, oh my gosh, I can't find a seat on St. Patty's Day, and you go through that same beer super fast, even just right. that. So it's one of those things that's hard to juggle there. So with these beers like that one, do you guys have any that either, I don't want to say secret, but let's use the word secret beers that are kind of in the works, or at least something you're like, man, we really want to do one of these. We haven't started yet, but it's kind of on the radar. What's a beer like that you guys are looking at?
Like maybe a Doppelbock?
I knew he was going to say it. I was angling for that.
We do have, with our size system here, our fermenters are not constantly tied up, which gives us the ability to actually do proper lagers, and I've been really happy
with what
we've been able to create that way. So a Doppelbock is something we were thinking about for potentially one of our winter season beers, but didn't quite fall into the rotation with the other lagers we already had on.
Yeah.
So we try and plan some of that stuff pretty far out, but it's really hard to tell if we're going to have room to put something on for a special occasion. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have a list of things that we want to do, and then tweak that as we get closer to, is this a good idea, or should we,
it's gotta be feasible.
Should we put this one, on the back burner for a little while? So right now we're getting ready for our 1-year anniversary, and we've got kind of a lot going on to get ready for that. And that falls in between Christmas and New Year's on December 28th. So we're also kind of tying in some of our seasonal holiday beers with that as well.
So do you have like an anniversary ale or something that you have planned?
We do, yeah. So we made a sort of just calling it a Belgian strong ale. It was going to kind of take that place of a high alcohol, Belgian influenced flavor for our because we do get those couple every once in a while that just want something Belgian, and I don't have a whole lot of brewing Belgian beer experience, so for me it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I get the gist of it. So we made this strong ale for that, and then we are doing a special version of that beer that'll be released specifically for the anniversary party, and it's a whiskey barrel aged Belgian strong ale. And we'll actually be bottling that and releasing those bottles for sale at the tap room.
Is this your first time doing a bottle like that?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yep. That's awesome.
All right. And is in the process? Are we in the barrel right now, or where are we in that process?
So part of it, we basically took the batch and we got some of it getting that oak and whiskey flavor transferred, and then the rest of it's just going on as our normal rotational series. So the one. The regular batch is probably going to get released before the anniversary.
Sure.
That's in the tank conditioning now, and then the whiskey barrel one we still have to bottle probably in the next week or two.
And how long have we been working with the whiskey? How long is it?
Not very long. It's going to be we're kind of short on time anyway. So what we're doing is sort of a fresh barrel approach, so it's going to be a little hot at first. It'll mellow out over time. But it wasn't like, sometimes if you get a barrel that's already been used or it's been dried out, sometimes there's like second, third runnings of beer through them. You really have to sit in order to pick up any of that flavor, and we've got a really fresh flavor infusion.
So that'll help with the time crunch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing is we kind of made this decision and then decided the way we wanted to go with it. Some things didn't quite work out, so we kind of landed on this. And the idea is to get the bottles released hopefully 2 weeks before Christmas, so that people can come in and buy them and make some special local gifts out of them.
Stocking stuffers.
Like exactly.
I'm going to have to get a very big stocking.
It'll be a 22-ounce bomber.
Awesome. That sounds cool.
I wanted to mention once again, since we have been talking for a minute, I'm here at Beachfly Brewing, and we're here in sunny Florida, Indian Harbor Beach. You can swing in and see these guys pretty much. Are you guys open 7 days a week?
7 days a week.
Yeah, 7 days a week. You can come in, get yourself a beer. They're at 1080 East O'Galley Boulevard, Indian Harbor Beach. I'm just going to say this. I did actually check beforehand, but after you listen to this podcast, because I know I'm going to have tens of thousands of fans by the time this one's released, all tens of thousands of you can come in here and mention that you listen to the Drinkin and Drivin podcast. And just the time shortly after the podcast is released, if you mention that you heard me on the podcast, or heard all of us on the podcast, they'll give you $1 off on a pint. So just kind of letting you guys know that. I have a couple more questions, and then we're going to take a quick little break. You're going to the gas station, and you go to the old 7-Eleven. So we won't even say a fancy gas station. We'll just say just a 7-Eleven, because I asked this question, and I said my beer, and apparently I was talking about too fancy of a gas station. So we'll say a 7-Eleven. You go to 7-Eleven, you need to pick up some beer just to have. Which beer are you grabbing? I'll start with you.
So it's like a domestic.
Whatever 7-Eleven has.
Yeah.
I mean,
it doesn't have to be domestic anymore.
I say we can branch out a little. I don't want to go too much because I know
talking about a single, right?
Just some beer. Because I know if you go to like a really nice Publix, they have pretty good beer selection now. So it can't be Publix. You can't go to Publix.
No BOGO.
No BOGO.
Well, usually I've been seeing some like Two Hearted Ale and 7-Elevens. First going to go with from the big boys. From my time in Colorado, I usually go Coors Banquet.
Oh,
there you go.
It's not a bad beer.
It's not a bad beer at all.
I can drink it.
Classic. So I'm the worst. I will go from one gas station to another until I find what I'm looking for.
It's not that simple.
I also I tend to check dates on things, so I'll very often buy whatever I'd like to drink that seems the freshest. But the one thing that I seem to be able to get really consistently at most gas stations is actually from over in Tampa. It's Coppertail's Free Dive IPA.
Okay.
And they distribute that pretty well and just about everywhere. And if I can get my hands on that, or Cycle Brewing is doing their Crank IPA. I think it's being brewed over in Lakeland right now, and it's on mass distribution, so you can get that at a ton of gas stations.
I haven't seen that. That's cool.
Yeah. So I mean, but like if I'm at the gas station I don't want to be at, and I'm still gonna get beer,
it's your only opportunity.
I grew up here. My college beer was Yingling, so
there you go.
Straight for it.
There's nothing wrong with Yingling. I mean, Yingling was.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean. Yeah, Yingling was kind of.
They've got cool history.
I would say a lot of people, that's their first jump away from Anheuser-Busch or Miller Coors. So that's really cool. I'm okay with Yingling.
They make it good. Their Oktoberfest is actually pretty solid.
Yeah, they're trying a bunch of new stuff.
They are. I like that. I got respect.
I think a lot of the bigger guys, I mean, are taking notice of craft beer and seeing that we've got to do something new, because what has always worked isn't working the way, as craft beer gets a bigger bite of the pie, they're trying to hold on to what they've always had.
Yingling's a much smaller big guy too, so
Yeah.
I feel like they've got to be creative,
Yeah, so that's great. And the other thing is, any local breweries other than your own, obviously, that you go to, we'll just say within an hour drive, a place you can go. So a local brewery that if you are going to go to a local brewery, you're going to have something. Who's somebody that you guys would like to go to?
Well, being in industry here now, like we're pretty close with all the breweries in the area, so I don't.
This is like
It's hard to pick
which
one.
one of your children is your favorite.
I mean, they all have something cool to offer that's a little different.
There's got to be like a beer specifically. That
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It doesn't
I
have to
love
be.
this beer.
I'm not going to say, I'm going to drive right past this other brewery to go to the other one. But we'll just say a beer. Right now we're in early December, so beer that you could say, hey, I'm going to go to a brewery nearby because right now they have this, and it's kind of a style that I like, or just if you can think of one.
I mean, when I'm out and about, at a restaurant, you can always find Dragon Point, and I think what the guys at Intro are doing right now with that beer and getting it out everywhere, and it's a really solid IPA that it's better than most IPAs that other bars have on tap.
Which, by the way, you can get at the Chumley's, because I was just I got it at that Chumley, not the one
in Indiana.
Yeah, the one I drove all the way to Indiana the other day just to see if they had Dragon Point there. No, so the Chumley's here, you can get Dragon Point there.
The other of the local breweries, I like. If I'm gonna do a little drive, like going up Cocoa Village, hanging out at Dirty Ore and Bug Nutty, they're across the street, but I think Dirty Ore is doing some really cool things. A lot of variety there. Their IPAs are usually on point, and their flavored beers are kind of cool too. So they're doing some cool things with sours and hot beers. So
whenever we get a chance, my family likes to try and get down to the Vero Sebastian area because there's kind of a cool little niche scene down there with plenty of options. So we'll kind of, depending on who's open, and that's always difficult too, or
right.
Whatever schedule. But I like going to Orchid Island down there whenever I can. I think they're pumping out just tons.
Their beer's good. I've never been to the brewery though.
Super like fruit specific but well balanced beers, and we actually are working on a collaboration with Paradolia down there.
Oh, nice! They're on my list.
Yeah, and they're just they're just cool guys. That's one of the places where you would go hang there if it wasn't a brewery, and it just makes it that much better. So,
I like their logo too.
Yeah. They
seem like they're fun.
They do a good job. So anywhere down there, I mean, even Walking Tree and stuff like that. There's a lot of cool options down that way. And the first place that came up was my wife is from Zephyr Hills over in the Tampa area,
okay.
So we go back and forth quite a bit. And like Zephyr Hills has a brewery right there in the town that we can walk to from her parents' house. That's pretty cool. But we take 417. And there's the Lake Nona Boulevard exit. Yeah. There's this...
all those medical complexes.
Yeah. But right in there, there's this brewery and brick oven pizza spot called Park Pizza. We stopped there the first time just because the kids were screaming. We were hungry. We were like, let's get out and do something. And the beer's phenomenal. The pizza's amazing. It's right off 417.
Really?
So I recommend anyone making that drive to do a little stop off.
I love when you kind of happen upon a place like that. You're just like, wow.
Yeah,
and it's just
in Florida,
two style. You can see the whole brew house every time I've been there. The brewmaster's there, or one of the owners. It's a cool spot, and if you're traveling anyway, put a little stop in there.
It's funny. It's like Orlando is finally starting to get some breweries.
The wave is on its way. Yeah,
they just stayed like a void for so long. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, in Orlando, is so big that you could be in Orlando and still be in a brewery desert. But if you get to the right area, you can you can go across the street.
There's a good handful.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. What about Joe? What about you?
Me? Well, honestly, this was going to go into my final question for this segment because it's actually been on my mind fairly recently because I had it
weighing on your heart.
It's been weighing on my heart because I bought some not super long ago, but we're kind of getting out of the season. But pumpkin beers. So pumpkin beers, yay or nay?
I like pumpkin beers. From a brewery owner standpoint, you can't make too much of it because it really has a short window when you can sell it.
Yeah.
So we did a pumpkin beer. We just did it on our pilot system, just a little 10-gallon batch, and that was enough to wet people's whistle on what we could do with pumpkin, but not enough that it's sitting around in December.
Right. That's nice.
Smart.
So, and the reason I brought that because my local one that I had not super long ago, and I had one can up until maybe 2 weeks ago, and then I drank it was the Intracoastal, the Pumpkin Ain't Easy.
I don't think I had that one.
That was good, man. Like for Yeah, and that's once again a local one. Like that one's still. If I had one more can of it, I think that would have been what. Like if I had a can, but because they use like a lot of vanilla in there, so it was like really, it was really good. It reminded me of almost like a cream soda kind of thing. But yeah, so that was probably my favorite recently that I've had at a brewery that kind of stuck in my mind because my wife and I both are pumpkin beer people, and I know pumpkin itself doesn't have a big flavor, but it's the spices. But yeah, so that one we bought the little 4-pack there at the brewery, and that one just like we bought it, and I was like, man, those are really good. So yeah, the pumpkin ain't easy. That would be the beer that I've had recently that. If it was still on tap, or it might be. Hey, maybe when I leave here, I'll head that way. Yeah. I'll head that way. But yeah, so the pumpkin ain't easy. That would be the beer locally as of today's date. That's still, if I could have one more right now, I would be happy. Yeah. I'd say, okay, now I'm good for the season. The season's now officially over. I think I had it too far before Thanksgiving because I think Thanksgiving still. You're touching the pumpkin pie, but yeah, Christmas is a little.
You can
too
have
far,
pumpkin beer during Thanksgiving.
I mean,
sure.
So
that's what's funny about pumpkin beer and breweries is they're all racing to get it out first so that they have the first one out, but then it's too early for the pumpkin beer.
Exactly. Yeah. But Helen Blazes does have that pumpkin habanero, which is that's pretty legit too.
It is very good. I liked it a lot.
So that's another pumpkin one that I would like.
To do a pumpkin beer history podcast.
Great. I should definitely do one. That would be great.
Well, I'll be on that episode, even if I have to be quiet the whole time and I just drink some of the beers because pumpkin's my jam. So and pumpkin and then like an Oktoberfest, those are kind of my like everyone's like, oh, Christmas is coming up. I was like, no, and I don't even care that it's Halloween. It's that time of year. Some people are like, oh, great, Halloween. I get all those things. No, I'm all about those flavors.
I'm the same way with Oktoberfest beer. I like trying all that's a great style to me because or Marzen depending, right? Like we're talking about. But you actually get a lot of variety within that. Within that flavor, I feel like the standard is kind of almost wishy-washy in the U.S., which is kind of a good thing.
It's funny because it's one of those styles that whether you have the equipment or not, everyone wants to do, and being that it's a lager, you get a lot of diversity because people are sometimes it's an ale. Well, right, exactly. Yeah. They don't have another way to do it, so it's kind of one of the lagers that everybody makes.
Kind of sucks for brewers. We have to do this.
Yeah, well, they call it a Mocktoberfest.
A Mocktoberfest. I like that. That's funny.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick pause here, stretch our legs, all that stuff. So we'll be back, and we're going to drink some beer.
Sweet.
Now it's time to drink a beer. All right, guys, we're back. It's been probably about 10 seconds of radio time and I don't know, about half an hour or so. So everyone's refreshed. Our beerless time is over. It's time for the best part of the whole thing. At least the best part for me. You guys might hate it because it might not make good radio, but I'm about to drink beer, so I'm happy. So right now we've got a flight in front of us, and that's a flight as in a FLY because Beachfly GHT. So we've got a flight in front of us. We've got 5 different beers. I'll ask a little bit about the beer. I'll drink the beer. We'll laugh. We'll cry. Also, just to let you know, these guys have some food. So a lot of this, they even do food pairings, and they even cook with some of these beers. We'll even get into that. And there's one thing, I didn't have one today, but I will have it next time. They actually make a michelada with one of their beers. If you're not familiar with the michelada, well, that's what Google's for. Without further ado, we're going to dive right into our first beer, which is going to be your IPA. That's the IHBPA, sitting at 62 IBUs and 6.8 ABV. What can you tell me about this, guys?
So this is our flagship IPA. It's our bestseller. Probably because it's an IPA. I think it's one of our better beers, but it's also just...
Those 3 letters sell.
Those 3 letters make craft beer sell.
Even when you put 2 letters in between them, it still sells.
Yeah. Exactly. This has been our kind of biggest challenge we've had is getting this one dialed in correctly. All of our other core beers, we've had the recipe more or less dialed in within version 2 or 3, which would have... Most of these beers we've been redoing the recipes since, I would say, March for most of them. A couple, Scallywag, we love the first version. We've been going with that since December. This one we've been tweaking. We have not been able to find the hop blend that we just are in love with.
So since this is your big seller, and by the way, extremely drinkable. I like the flavor. I can see why it's a big seller around here. I would say it's pretty true to form. Tastes really nice. Since this is a big seller, and I know I kind of touched on it before, but I know you've got a full kitchen, so not some people have like a little gut truck outside. That's a real food truck. Sorry,
Food truck.
We used to call
gut truck.
Yeah, the gut. Sorry, when we were in the Army, they used to have like the little truck that came on and had like Little Debbie. You eat all that crap, it's going to give you a gut. So that's what we called the gut truck, and I couldn't think of the real name, but yeah. The gut truck is what I could think. So you don't have anything. You actually have a full kitchen. So what usually goes pretty well with this? What seems to be your experience kind of the best to go with this particular beer?
So we use this, the IHBPA. We use this in a barbecue sauce, and then we also use it in our aioli that goes on the crab cakes. But as far as pairing, typically I would say anything with the pork. This goes really well with. You get just the blends of the hops, and then the seasoning we do on the pork is really, really nice.
The pork uses the purple porpoise.
Our pork is marinated and cooked in the purple porpoise, and the purple porpoise and
the purple porpoise pork pale ale.
Sorry, what?
And the IHB, the purple porpoise is like the little brother of the IHB. It's a hopped pale ale, but definitely not hopped to the same level as the IHB. Right. But
do you guys use the exact same hops for the batch that you're doing a purple porpoise?
Yeah, and that's
different beers, different malt backbones, but they
work well together.
They work well together.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons why it pairs well with the pork is the pale ale uses Mosaic and Centennial. Centennial is the backbone of Two Hearted, so most people have a pretty good relationship with that hop, and then Mosaic's become a really hot commodity, kind of like Citra. So I think the fruitiness of the hops really comes through in the pork marinade, and that's kind of where the IPA pairs nicely with it. And what's nice about having the IPA and the pale ale for the cores is if you're not into bitterness, the pale ale is right for you. If you want a little bitterness, the IPA is perfect.
Well, this IPA has a sort of it doesn't have a heavy bite in the finish either. So even if you're kind of like wanting to move into the IPA realm, it's easy to drink, and it doesn't destroy your palate.
That gateway drug IPA.
Correct. Yeah.
Gateway IPA.
There you go.
I mean, name of your next
point.
Well, the thing is,
IPA.
well, I was just thinking because St. Louis, where I was before, that's the gateway. They call it the gateway to the west.
That's
so
right.
I'm wondering if there is a gateway. I feel it's got to be right.
If you've come up with a good name, someone else.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, I've come up with so many thoughts.
Had that conversation.
I've come up with so many thoughts independently, and then I Google and I'm like, crap. Mm-hmm. One thing that I have Googled that I haven't found out anywhere else. It's a term that I coined.
Don't say it.
I'm going to take it.
No, go ahead. It's totally okay. Flatus apparatus. So flatus is another word for a fart, and apparatus is a thing. So
a fart machine.
So or your ass.
Oh,
your ass is a fart machine. Sit your flatus apparatus down.
And the reason you say that it's fine is because there's no real functional use for that.
Exactly.
No brewer's going to steal it.
I mean, some people's flatus apparati, function better than others, but is that plural for apparatus? Apparatuses?
We can go with that.
Say it confidently.
Yeah. Why not? Even if you're wrong, just move forward, and people will think you're right. So we're staying in the IPA family. We've got all the kids with the skinny jeans and the glasses that they don't need. They're drinking the New England IPAs now. Right. So and I see you do have one here. It's called Crossbill. What's the name Crossbill kind of mean?
So this is part of our Snowbird series, since we feel New England IPAs are from the north and they're migrating down to Florida, so we decided to name.
They invaded and took over everything.
Yeah,
a long time ago.
And then they'll retreat in a couple of months, and it'll be back to normal.
So we name. We kind of actually have two New England IPA series.
Snowbird series.
The Snowbird series.
It's kind of like A and B.
And then we have the Kitchen Sink series, but that's not necessarily. Last one was a New England IPA.
If you keep saying Siri, you're gonna mess up your phone.
Hey Siri, boop, boop. Hey Siri's.
So this is one of our New England IPAs, part of the Snowbird
Yeah.
group.
So Crossbill is, if you look up Snowbird on Google, you'll get all kinds of interesting different articles here and there. But we really thought that it would be funnier with this series to just pick
An actual bird
and try and make a beer off it. So the first one we ever did was Canada Goose, which it's not a Canadian goose, it's a Canada goose, and I thought that was hilarious.
Are you saying there's actually two separate birds? One's called the Canadian goose and one's called the Canada
No, I
goose?
think there's only a Canada
Oh,
goose.
so there is no goose called the Canadian
I
goose.
don't think so.
That's your
That's
American
funny.
bias.
I don't-
Calling it Canadian.
man.
I don't bird on a regular basis, but the first New England IPA attempt that we ever did was the Canada Goose, and we kind of fell into the Snowbird series through that. So the next one we looked up was Crossbill, and it's a funny little bird whose bill actually like makes an X, and that's kind of like the most notable thing about
It's
it.
like he's got
And
sideways
tiny
over
little
bite or something.
tiny little yellow bird, and its beak crosses like that. So I was like, well, sweet, we'll take 2 hops and we'll make the entire beer about these 2 different
man.
hops.
You went in deep with this.
Well, you have.
I
I mean,
that. Oh, that's
you
good.
spend enough time in the brewery alone, you start thinking about this
Will
kind of
puts a
stuff.
lot of thoughts
He
into
spends
all
a
of our
lot
names.
alone.
So this is a cross of Comet and Yukonot hops that made up this version of our New England IPA. But we got a list of like 10 different types of Snowbird that we're gonna do. And then what Zach was getting to is we might throw in a couple.
Florida
you know,
snowbirds.
Florida Snowbird stereotypes in there, like socks and flip flops and stuff like
Oh,
that.
that'd be funny. Socks and flops.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed just right off the bat. So the last one we're sitting at 62 IBU. And the last one was 6.8 ABV, and right here we're 6.9. So we're right in the same wheelhouse, but 13 IBU here.
Well, I'm curious. Do you think it tastes like 13 IBU?
Absolutely not.
Right. So it's theoretical IBUs, and the problem is
They're tricky, aren't they, those IBUs?
there's an inconsistency with how we measure bitterness units in beer. Mainly when it comes to the late editions and the cold side editions, there's sort of this stigma for a long time that heat was the key to accessing bitterness in hops. I have hops back there right now. If you guys want to go chew on some, you'll notice they're bitter without any heat. So there's obviously bitterness coming from our dry hop, but the software we use to sort of estimate bitterness doesn't really account for that.
Oh,
So what we have
is that pretty typical?
It's very typical, and it's becoming more a key issue. And as far as breweries who are making a lot of these things, one of the big ones is Hidden Springs does their ZFG Pale Ale, 0 IBU Pale Ale. And that's because if you put that beer into software with, I'm assuming they add nothing in the hot side and nothing in the whirlpool, and it's all dry hop.
Yeah.
That would on any calculator pretty much come up as a 0 IBU beer, but there's
I did
no
not
way
know
it's
about
0
this.
IBU, and the equipment that it takes to actually analyze your bitterness units is not something that a lot of people have. So the problem,
I've got like 3 of them in my garage.
yeah. Oh, perfect.
And I don't have a garage because I live in a townhouse. So
That's
there you go.
impressive.
So it's probably not 13 IBU,
Sure.
but all I can do is either guess off of flavor
Which you can't.
or go off of what the
That's all you have to
software is
do.
kind of calculating.
So this is interesting because I was thinking you have these beers that have these crazy high IBUs, and when
Which
you
was
taste
a
it, you're
trend
like,
for a while,
Well, but you'll taste them and you'll be like, this doesn't really taste all that bitter at all. It's sort of the opposite effect, but that's actually because of the alcohol content, the flavor
Well,
profile.
and
this is more
bitterness
of a technical
saturation.
issue.
Bitterness is something that we have a range that we can perceive.
Yeah.
And beyond a certain range, it all tastes the same.
Yep.
So McKellar and Dogfish Head both did experiments with this, where they did these insanely high IBU beers, and they're still, they're bitter as hell, but they're no more bitter than the other most bitter beer you've ever had.
Yeah.
At about
I gotcha.
100 that they say is
Yeah,
about where you
it's
stop
the tolerance
detecting
for
it.
it. Yeah, exactly.
differences.
That's cool. That's pretty
So
interesting.
it's interesting, and like
Science.
you have a couple beers and you get in these debates with your friends, and
Yeah.
nobody knows what they're talking about, but everyone's screaming. It's a good
Yeah.
time.
I will say with this
I love
one, so you say 13 IBU. At first, the very first, and maybe it's because I just had the other one, but at that very first touch of the tongue, it tastes a little bit, and then I get the little bitter, at the end. So that first touch at the tongue,
Yeah, absolutely.
like as soon as it touches my tongue, you could say, "Oh, it is 13 IBU," and then it's like, "Oh, nope, I was wrong."
Yeah, well, and these style, the New England IPA has been a bit of a challenge for us here based on the equipment we're using and what ingredients we have available. Originally, I think a lot of people thought that this style was just a fad where people wanted a hazy beer for no reason. But there's a lot of science that goes into how the flavor of these beers is created, and it's sort of this transformation of the hops being incorporated at the right time and under the right conditions. And I feel like this is one of the first times that we've really nailed it. And we've tried a couple, and it's not that the beers were bad, but there was something missing. So there is a lot more going on, and part of that is keeping the beer on the sweeter tasting side because it accentuates the fruitiness of the hops.
Well, when you drink this beer after drinking Indian Harbor, they're clearly not the same at all. They're very different. I mean, they both are IPAs, but I think it's even considered its own style now, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So it is a different style beer, and you can taste it.
And we'll do, we'll do a West Coast IPA, and the difference between those will be drastic, but the only real difference in the recipe is going to be where we add the hops and how we try and clarify it. But beyond that,
is the haze indicative of New England?
Well, it's become important in this style.
Okay,
I'd say this
for better or worse.
This is our fourth attempt at a New England hazy IPA. We did the first one was our Canna Goose. It stayed hazy for about 2 weeks, and then became
cleared right up.
Clear as can be.
Really,
but it did have that juicy IPA character. Our next one was Shake Your Broody, which was Will's Mad Scientist, where he combined New England, Brute, and Milkshake IPAs all together.
How was that?
It was delicious, but it also did not stay hazy for more than a week.
Yeah.
So it then became a Brute Milkshake IPA. But
that's when you put that glitter in and make it hazy again.
You got to do what you got to do.
The third one was our Kitchen Sink, and that one actually stayed hazy, but that was a little more of a West Coast style of an IPA that was hazy. And this one's the most true to style we've gotten that stayed hazy.
How long has it been hazy? Like, what's the longest you've had it?
So there's a technique that I think we've dialed in on that works for our system. And I talk with Chris up at Dirty or the guys at Intra about, what works and what doesn't work for everybody. And it seems that you tinker until it works for your setup, and then that's what you do. And it's different for everybody. But there's a particular yeast strain, and there's a particular process that seems to get us that permanent, it's like an oil haze instead of a yeast haze.
Yeah.
And that will last. Now, because of the yeast that we're using, it's not as hazy as someone who has more options than us, but it keeps it to the point. And it's weird to even say out loud that there are people that really only care about this beer if it's hazy.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, when he said, does it need to be hazy? Zach, you kind of did the hand thing, like, well, in my brain, it's like, oh, if it's not hazy, it's not a New England IPA.
Well, which is funny because if you order a stout, you don't go up to them and be like, is it black? How'd you get it to stay black? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
But for the hazy IPA, it's become one of the trademarks of it. It's a unique thing, it really doesn't affect the texture of the flavor as much. Like I know there's breweries out there that have taken a prime recipe New England IPA and then centrifuged it so it's crystal clear, and it still tastes that way.
Exactly.
So it's just kind of an interesting concept. I mean, now that we've nailed it, and I do notice a quality of these beers that is kind of unique, and I appreciate it, and I like what it can do with our ability to play around with new hops and stuff like that. I think we'll try and keep something like this on.
It is I guess more than a trend at this point, because it has been for
it's lasted more than a lot of other things.
It has, but I like everything, and I do think they're good. I'm just not as big of a fan of New England IPAs as standard regular IPAs, I guess.
Well,
there's a lot of rye and black. I like all of them.
Yeah.
It's kind of my.
But with hazy in New England, it's kind of a cash cow. People are going after it hard, and I think there's plenty of good and bad versions out there.
And whether you want to,
there's a lot of
whether you want to brew it or whether you want to drink it, you're the brewer, and you got to brew what the people want. Right. So honestly, I talked to another brewery, and they talked about their favorite thing to brew and their favorite thing to drink is a lager, just a really, really nice lager. And given my druthers, this is what I would make, and I would perfect my lager, and this is what I would have.
A basic lager is so much easier to make crappy. You know what I mean? So when you get one that's just perfect, I think it's something you can appreciate.
Yeah,
somebody who drinks beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're going to drink on a regular basis, good lager you can drink always. That's like, I don't want to drive a race car today. I don't want to drive a minivan. I just want to drive like a regular car.
Yeah.
I don't need anything.
You appreciate
fancy.
its simplicity.
It's something exactly.
You guys ever have a Weinstefener original, the blue one?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? It's a Helles lager. Oh my gosh, it's such an amazing. So simple.
They call it, they kind of coined it as a brewer's beer in the industry because at the end of the day, you see every single craft brewery in the last 3 to 4 years has gone back to this. We're just going to make something. We're going to make this because people want it now, but we've been making it because the brewers want it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have brewers come in brewery all the time. They let me know which brewery they're from and talk to them. And we always get judged on our Kolsch, which is our light beer, and our Stout, which is our dark beer.
Really, those are the two standards.
And those are what every time a brewer comes in here, that's what they order. Those two beers, usually they'll order back-to-back, or there are 2 half pints, and they drink those 2 beers because they say, light beer or Kolsch, you can't hide anything.
Yeah.
And your Stout is where you get to shine on your abilities.
Yeah.
Well,
that's pretty interesting.
One of my other episodes, one of the individuals, he had very, very strong opinions about a Kolsch. Give that a listen. That's with the Schlafly Brewery.
I know Schlafly.
Yeah, you know those guys? Yeah. They make good beer. They've been doing it since 1991, but they do have a very strong opinion about the Kolsch. So it's actually, if you don't even like hearing my voice, well, good. That's a whole section without my voice. So listen to that. You'll learn a little bit of something. But
would you call it a rant, perhaps?
No, it was good because he brought me beer, and then he talked about the beer that he brought me and why he thought a Kolsch should be served in this particular. It was real.
Cool,
it was nice.
Man, yeah.
It was nice. And because he's been there since the company started.
91.
So since 91, so he's been in beer for a minute or two. He knows what he's talking about. So who was I to argue? So now we've been doing some hazy stuff here, and we're going to continue on a little bit of haze journey here with Where'd That Man Go? Where'd That Man Go? We got a sour saison, 6.6 ABV, 29 IBUs. Let's talk about what's with the name Mango.
Well, it's our mango beer. So one of the coolest things for me about moving back to the area and getting to brew here is that we've got this abundance of fruit and local produce that just grows because of the environment we're in.
Oh yeah, I've got mango trees growing. So
exactly. So from day one of this project, I go out and I wouldn't quite call it forage, but I will find a tree in someone's yard with fruit on it and ask them if I can have that fruit.
I was wondering if you were going to ask. I will just get it. I was like, oh, that's not called
foraging.
That's called theft.
Well, technically, if the tree is hanging over the sidewalk, it's free game.
Heck yeah, it is.
I don't have to ask.
Yeah. We have a lot of access, whether it's star fruit, loquat, mango. There's people growing all kinds of citrus. We have sea grapes that grow up and down the coast.
Literally right
there. Coconut, bananas. It's amazing how much stuff we have.
So are these mangoes literally from like local people?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
The beauty.
We have our regulars will bring in fruit and say, "Can you do anything with this?" So
we always say yes.
You guys are going to be screwed when you become national.
We're getting some lemongrass here soon.
Oh, that's awesome. Really
nice.
Cool, yeah.
So it's one of those things where if someone brings a fruit in, we can make a beer up to whatever volume that fruit allows us.
It's good because you do have that little pilot system, so
exactly.
You can totally.
Before Hurricane Dorian faked us out, we had a couple ladies came in and they brought us all the star fruits from their tree because they didn't want them flying through the windows.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine has 3 or 4 jackfruit trees in his backyard. Cool. He brought me a couple of those, so we.
Oh, that's great.
Took the star fruit and the jackfruit, put it all in a beer, called it Fruit Storm, and that was one of our Thursday releases.
Have you had, speaking of jackfruit, I had this not too long ago, Playa Linda. They make a pulled pork sandwich with the jackfruit. So they use jackfruit instead of pork.
As a substitute.
And it's just like a little pulled pork sandwich.
Man,
I'm telling you, it's
You put enough spice and barbecue sauce.
Obviously you can tell,
I'm such a
but
meat
you
person.
look at it and it looks right,
Pretty,
and it might be a little bit more spongy than actual pulled pork.
Yeah.
But it's actually
everything
it's a
I've
damn
had
good
there
sandwich.
is awesome.
It's a damn good
I
sandwich.
will
They're
say
really good.
jackfruit is the weirdest thing I've ever cut open.
Yeah, they're extremely
Is
weird.
that the one that's all white looking?
It's
on the
bizarre.
inside? Is that
It's
jackfruit?
this
it's like a
alien.
creamy yellow on the
So
inside.
Big thing
Like
with
a bunch of
spines
bell
all over it,
Oh,
and you
weird.
cut it open, and it sort of opens up like some kind of alien egg with all these fibers.
It's
and
sweet,
sap.
but a
Is it
little bit
sweet?
garbagey too.
Garbage, did you say?
I promise you, I'm
it's
not even kidding.
It's the juicy fruit flavor.
Oh, I love juicy fruit.
Yeah, so
It's
the
gonna
fruit,
move ya.
the fruit has that juicy fruit character too. So
Oh,
that's
that's
what I was
pretty
trying to
cool.
get in the beer. But with the mango beer, we knew that mangoes, and that's something I'm trying to get better at, is coordinating our beers with the season. We did a low quat beer with that harvest. We did our
That
mango
season's coming up,
beer where-
February-ish?
Yeah, and
I
we're
gotta
getting
look
into strawberry blueberry season, which I'm stoked on. But this beer, we originally were gonna call Flamingo, like Florida dash mango.
Oh, nice.
Flamingo. I'm a sucker for the puns. But
Well,
our,
y'all
You
should
mentioned
be.
you are a dad, so I mean,
yeah.
that-
Dad
you're allowed
jokes
to
are-
be.
dad
You're
jokes
allowed
are
to
my
be.
territory. Unfortunately, that name was already taken by another friendly neighbor to the west.
You already
that
said
we-
this, yeah.
So
That's a
so
good
we
pun,
decided to
yeah.
change it. It was kind of a last minute decision. So it's Where That Mango, whether it works or not. But
It's a
the
pun,
fact
man.
is,
That's what matters.
the fact is that is a donated mango that got pumped into this thing. It's a light Belgian saison. It was kettle soured, not enough to necessarily rip the enamel off your teeth.
No,
but,
definitely, it's
but it gives
it's
it this
very
kind of
doable.
tart, refreshing
Yeah.
kick.
Agreed.
I love a good sour that just tears your face up, but you can only drink. You know what I mean? You can only drink a flight.
I would
size,
say
like
this is
4
this is the
ounces.
only size that you could have of
This
one of those.
This is so drinkable.
And
It's
that-
like it's tart. It's tart.
Exactly.
It's tangy, but it's got the mango flavor. Almost has like almost a lemony sort of tart to it. I
Right,
like that.
right, and it's a clean tart. I think that kind of falls in line with the character of a lot of our beers.
great.
Where I like the only thing that really matters to me is drinkability. Like if you
Very
can't drink a pint and want another one, then I missed the mark.
But sometimes I think sometimes I like that though.
Well,
But again, you can't.
it depends on where you are. You know,
it's
if you're
not
at,
sellable. I
if you're at
guess.
like a beer festival and you want something memorable, that's one thing.
that's
Or
the
if you're
crazy stuff comes out.
if you're in a blizzard in Colorado and you want a beer that will literally warm you up, that's another thing. But like we're right here on the beach, like most of the days out of the year, I want you to drink a beer to cool off.
Yeah.
So I'd like
No,
it.
that makes sense.
Refreshing and easy drinking, and by the time you get done with, you're like,
I feel
man,
like I
I
could
need
eat
another
fish
one
with
now.
this.
Yeah.
I feel.
Have you
like
cooked
fish
with this? It's actually that's a good point. This seems like a good cooking beer.
This is more of a we haven't done any cooking with this one. This one pairs well with our fish tacos.
That's
and,
exactly what was on my mind with some fish tacos.
We do a lot of mango just in general with a lot of our food. So this thing just
It just
our
makes
fish
sense.
tacos, our shrimp tacos, anything from our seafood, our crab cakes. This pairs awesomely.
I would say, and I didn't even know. I haven't looked at the menu. I mean, I looked at it. I don't know, a week ago, and I didn't even know that there was fish taco on there. And that's all I could think of was like some little fish tacos with this beer. That's a marriage made in heaven there. So apparently, once again, you come up with an idea, someone already came up with it
Yeah.
first. So nailed it.
That's how it works.
So now we're leaving the old the Hayes factory here, and we're going down a little bit dark.
The dark side.
So we've got some dark side
The
right
dark
here.
side.
So this particular one that we're looking at is going to be scallywag, and scallywag is a term for kind of what, like a foolish person. What's the
No, man.
So
What?
Scallywag has an interesting history. We went back and forth on the name because it has a couple different meanings. But at the end of the day, it was appropriate for our location within the pirate-infested Caribbean.
Yeah.
That was kind of the idea.
Yar?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
A scurvy pirate who's gonna stab you in the
Right.
Not all pirates have scurvy. God, man,
Most of
scurvy
them
is if you
do.
don't get some citrus. Well, not down here. There's no pirate in the
Florida
Caribbean.
pirates don't.
In the Caribbean, where citrus grows so well, if you have scurvy, it's because you want scurvy.
I haven't looked it up in a
You're
while,
doing
but when we did the research beforehand, I think one of the definitions that you can come up with is that a scallywag was someone who was pro slavery reform before that was okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like a scallywag was like,
That's kind of messed up.
isn't
Like,
it?
how,
It's
how dare you
weird.
be against the enslavement of other people? You make
Right.
me sick.
Right.
What?
So
It's like
we
a marketing ploy by slave owners or something.
we went with it's a pirate, and we're just gonna leave it at that.
I think you made the right choice.
But it's
No,
foreign.
but I mean, you could still go with the other one because I'm assuming if this were back then, you would probably not be for the enslavement of others. So
Right.
you could still go with the other meaning. Like, you know what? I'm a scallywag. I'm okay with not being that.
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't fact check this, so if for some reason they're pulling my chain and
Yeah.
and that's not a correct definition, then I'm not a scallywag.
Yeah.
I've not
Wait,
done any fact checking.
Urban Dictionary is legit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, obviously.
This has, if there's enough upvotes for the definition, this has a great smell, man. It smells super good.
Yeah,
7.5% alcohol,
Oh.
54 IBU here.
It's a
Yeah.
pure
So
malted
foreign
barley.
extra stout is this kind of beauty of a dark beer where it embraces rich malt, a nice complex roast. It's got the alcohol to kind of back the whole thing up. And then it's hopped pretty heavily. It's
Yeah.
actually hopped almost like the old English IPAs were.
Well, I think I'm not even getting
Nice.
a lot of that hop, and I think it's because of all the other big flavors
Right.
in
And they
there.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
more of like a hop bitterness.
Yeah,
you know,
but the
as
bitterness
opposed
is
to-
Yeah,
there.
it's not
and then-
citrusy or
It does get a late addition, but they're English hops, which tend to have a little bit more of like a earthy,
Yep.
kind of
Love English beer.
robust quality to them.
tastes like dirt.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little
Sometimes
earthy.
dirt's appropriate.
A little bit.
I mean,
Hey,
dirt,
man.
dirt's good. If it
The best things come from dirt.
everything,
Yeah.
what,
God made
ashes
dirt,
to
dirt don't
ashes,
hurt.
dust to dust. So literally, you're dirt.
Exactly.
We're all
Yeah,
dirt.
This is awesome.
We went a strong roasty flavor on this, but we didn't want to go full on like coffee flavor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Which I-
and you did exactly
I think it's
that.
a really good. I personally don't drink coffee, and so it's not that so
Kinda
I
messed
told
up.
Will not to do that because I don't drink a lot
That's
of
messed
stouts. But I said if we could stay away from the coffee flavors, go roasty, and
Well, it's good. It makes it different.
he definitely nailed it. And then we do coffee beers because Will is a coffee aficionado.
Coffee.
Yeah.
You know, I see that as
Me
kind
too.
of a reoccurring theme. with
Coffee and beer go well.
brewers. It's like
Of course they do.
and
Yeah,
actually-
absolutely.
Schlafly, they do have an oatmeal stout that, and it's kind of a cool story that they had a local coffee joint, and they kind of they just would pour some coffee in there, like, hey, we're bringing some of our coffee, we're going to drink at your bar. They poured their coffee into the oatmeal
Oh,
stout.
the patrons.
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, the patrons, exactly.
that
They
worked
worked
for
at
the coffee place.
that worked for the coffee place, and they said, you know what, that's pretty good. So their oatmeal stout, the pre-existing oatmeal stout, they figured it out how much to do, and now that is a seasonal
See,
release.
You know, this is.
And I was
why-
like, that's two small businesses got together, and between them,
no, that's
they created
great.
something beautiful.
That's the magic
This
of
is
it.
this is
yeah.
what off camera, off mic or whatever. On our
What
break,
camera?
we were talking about blending. Blending beer with whiskey, blending beer with coffee. I mean, you don't realize how much power you have to create when you just have a few different things at your house. You're on your
Yeah.
own.
Yeah, one flavor at a time. Actually, our cold brew infused brown ale is going to be coming out in the next couple weeks that we've done with a local roaster, and that's one of my favorites because the level of kind of nuance that we've been able to work on with the right roast at the right temperature and the right way to infuse it into the beer. It tastes like that nitro cold brew that you can get from somebody,
that
but
sounds
it's
great.
like 6% alcohol.
Oh, and what's the caffeine and something like that? Is it?
So it's roughly like 6 pounds per 120 gallons or something. You're not gonna get a buzz from the caffeine more than you will the alcohol.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, the main reason, and this was once again when they were talking about that one, they said that their beer, their 12-ounce sport, had roughly the amount of caffeine as a cup of coffee.
Oh, wow, really?
Ours is a
That's a lot of
will
caffeine.
be way less
Ours
than
is gonna be
Yeah.
way less.
So that's what they told me. I don't know if
That's
I
a
don't
lot
know.
of coffee. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
they
Like,
probably
when you
use
think,
quite a bit.
when
Maybe
you
they
think about how much
concentrate it, use
ground
espresso.
you
Well, it does
use
say the
and
word
the-
coffee
yeah.
stout.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean,
An
if
actual
it's list of
coffee stout.
ingredients, I mean that's quite a bit of coffee.
So,
Could
so
be.
Zach, do you hate this new brew?
Yes.
Being a coffee hater.
The new brew, as in our coffee beer.
Yeah, the
that's
coffee
our,
beer.
our coffee beer that's coming out. I'm hoping we're gonna release it in December. It's brewing right now. The coffee just went in or is going in.
It's going in on the 9th.
On
Yeah.
the 9th.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
it's
going
next
in
week.
next week. We have the coffee
Way
ready to
put 'em
go.
on the spot.
I am not the biggest fan. I can drink a pint of it and I appreciate it for what it is, but it's not going to be my nightly drinker.
See, that's a good thing. That means that it really has that coffee flavor.
does.
So
It
us
is,
coffee
yeah.
lovers will,
When
will really
we did
dig
last
it.
time, like I said,
Have you
I
tried
really
that
appreciated it.
PBR coffee thing? Have you seen that?
No.
PBR has one that's out now. It's a PBR coffee. It comes in like the long skinny cans. So that's how you know it's fancy now.
Right, yeah.
So instead of like a regular thick can, it's more thick,
Yeah.
the thinner type cans. But yeah, I don't know exactly where it's available. But
Less
look it up.
volume, more material.
You know,
Yeah,
look,
exactly.
People like to knock on PBR. My brother's favorite beer is PBR, which I almost disown him because PBR is not a terrible beer.
It's not bad.
But I
It's a
mean,
good
I'm
beer.
a craft beer guy, and
Right.
my own brother,
Right place,
But
right time, man.
it
PBR
is.
is the best beer
But
you've ever had.
have you
Yeah.
had their the PBR
Their
ale,
IPA?
the
Pale
ale
ale?
that they did? That's actually a pretty good
Yeah.
beer.
Yeah.
I bought it kind of just to see what it was, and I was.
So that's your
I was
new
like,
fat.
this is quite.
That's
So
your
that
new,
marketing
worked
on you.
I guess it did.
That's your new gas
I'm
station beer
officially a
then?
hipster now. Yeah.
I will say with the Scallywag, one of the cool things was, like Zach was saying earlier, we went out and looked for as many 4 and extra stout examples as we could possibly find.
How many were there? Were there very many?
We probably found like 4 or 5 in total.
That's cool.
And they ranged entirely, alcohol and character.
Is there no real consistency to the style?
It's not, which is why we kind of fell back to the golden standard, which was a Guinness one. But what I like about the Scallywag is like the same kind of aspect that we brought to it was that if you drink the beer cold, fresh out of the tap, you could finish a pint before you realized what was going on. Because it's drinkable, but if you let it warm up, it's an hour's worth of expression.
Yeah.
It's a little more hops, a little more roast. Oh, there's that like alcohol kick.
Love
So
it.
you can literally sit on the patio with this, let it warm up, and enjoy every single layer of it. And that's probably my favorite aspect of that beer.
I would say that really the best way to go about that is say no, you're not going to order one. You're going to order 2.
Right.
Let that one sit while you're drinking your first one. Then you can start drinking the second one.
It's a fantastic idea.
Because then it's going to give
actually.
it some time.
It really is.
Or order 3. Why not? I mean, so we're going to go ahead and
10-minute vertical.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know what? This is research and development. I'm about 7 in here. And
Have you guys tried that 10-minute earlier?
So
I like it better than the
we're
5.
moving on. We've almost got the entire flight finished. So we're on our final approach on this flight.
This is the one I'm most excited about.
Is it?
Yeah.
I can see you're antsy right now.
I am antsy.
So I'll let you bring it in since you're excited. Let's go. Which beer is this, Dave?
This is the Brutal. This is a black IPA. What's the full name? I
It's
only have the Cliff Notes on
a black brute imperial IPA.
Oh man, I'm very excited. So many awesome things.
Yeah, just
merged into
buzzwords,
one.
just one after another.
They're buzzwords, but they all have meaning. An imperial, brewed IPAs. I feel like that's kind of like almost became a fad, like the New Englands did, but didn't really take on as much.
Well, it didn't have the same fan base.
I'm
They
saying
didn't
that,
have the same fan base, but
Well,
I
and this one's-
actually like them a lot better.
and this
heavy
one's some
carbonation, more of a
higher
bite.
alcohol here too. I mean, we're sitting at 9.5%. So
dark
I mean,
IPAs I'm a
yeah,
sucker for.
yeah.
in
So
general,
that is indeed brutal.
very excited.
So
Yeah.
Let's
let's
see
give
how
this
it
one
is.
to
It's
Oh my
it's a
god, it's
decent
got a
hop
big
bomb.
head, man.
Smells great.
It's got a little bit of the roast in there. The booze is decently well hidden in there.
It's pretty got a floral.
Yeah,
Hop on
absolutely. And the thing about
It has
like
a slight sweetness, which the
is-
smell
is interesting,
yeah.
right? Yeah, because it's officially it's a pretty dry beer because of the brute aspect to it, but because of the alcohol, you get that
Yeah,
sweetness. Yeah,
that's exactly. You can
The
definitely.
one cool thing about this beer or a couple cool things, but on the menu it says it's a 9 IBU beer. So it's one of the lowest IBU beers on our menu, but it has the most hops per barrel of any beer we have.
right.
And again, it goes back to that how
Oh my
IBUs are
gosh.
calculated. It's based on hot additions. This is just dry hops,
I
like
actually really
crazy.
like this.
Super
is awesome.
super heavy dry
It's my
hop.
favorite one.
I think I brutally like this beer.
Good. It'll do brutal things to you.
Now this, and maybe this is, of course, it's my preference. This is less drinkable than all the other ones.
Yes.
And drinkability is important for a beachside brewery.
Outside of my realm of comfort.
Man,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's so complex.
Yeah. Well, and
There's
it
so
comes-
much going on.
It comes in a little snifter, and when you get it cold, man, the thing about a black IPA, like the reason that style is difficult. It's like a white stout. You want it to taste like an IPA but look like a stout. Those things don't come naturally, or vice versa. So I think when you smell it, you get the IPA. There's definitely roast in there, but how dry it is and the level of bitterness that came from that dry hop, I think balance it all out.
I think what I really, honestly, what I really like about it, what we were just talking just a few minutes ago about suck the first one down and then drink the second one. We poured these quite some time ago, and we've talked. This thing,
small glass.
We're just in this segment. We're 47 minutes in on the recording time, so this has had plenty of time to sit there. And I honestly don't think I would want this one cold. I like this one at the temperature it is right now. It does, because sometimes the cold kind of hides some things.
I can agree with your sentiment, but I would also still want it cold.
Well, I want anything in any way I can get it.
I do think the warmer the beer gets, the more the flavor comes out, and this is a perfect beer for that.
This is great.
I want to do a 10-minute vertical on this one as well.
This is, if you want it to be great, let it wait. Yeah. I just came up with that.
This one right now, actually, our chef has created a milkshake version of this.
This
is the one we were doing.
I was here, and that is a pretty glass too. I looked at it, I was like, my head just turned. I was like,
I know we're running low on time, but what is how do you exactly do that? Is it literally chocolate ice cream blended up with it? Or
so we use vanilla ice cream. It's 3 ingredients: vanilla ice cream, chocolate syrup, and then the Brutal. And we just blend them all back in the kitchen and serve them in a glass. It's delicious.
How much of the beer flavor comes out in the milkshake?
It's really on the back end.
Yeah,
You just taste the alcohol. So sweet takes the front end of that drink, and then the back end is all the booze.
Great, that's cool.
Having a 9.5% alcohol beer is really one of the keys to that milkshake.
Because it can support all the other stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And so and I think it'd work with. We do beer floats here too, and we usually do that with our scallywag.
Yeah.
And adding scoop of ice cream to the scallywag is a really good combination because it just kind of creams up the scallywag and gives a little different body. But
can you get the milkshake with other beers if you wanted? Could you be like, hey, can I get that, but can you put this in instead? The scallywag, for example, that'd be a great one.
Yeah, we're a little restaurant. We can do whatever you want.
Flexible,
loosey goosey.
If you ask,
no substitutions.
I know a guy. I can make it happen.
No soup for you. So, and that's one. That's honestly one thing I do like. I've been here a few times just before today. One thing I do like, just the overall. You walk in the door. We are steps from the beach, and you look at it, and your steps from the beach. It looks like it's steps from the beach, and then it's got that same thing with being at the beach. You're not going to be in long pants and a shirt and a tie and all this stuff. You're going to be in shorts and flip flops, and that's what the vibe is here.
Meanwhile, I'm literally in long pants.
Well, you came from your job, but when, once this takes off, you won't have another job. It'll be this.
That's right.
So you're good. So you'll always be in shorts and flip flops. Even with the beer, they take their beer seriously. They make, as in when they make it, they're making good beer. They're doing the right thing, but then they don't take themselves so seriously to say like, I'm above putting ice cream in my beer. That's great. And then if you look, they have other drinks on the menu. They have a beer mosa. That's just orange juice mixed with the Kolsch, some bitters and a garnish. So that's awesome for us.
I really like this beer cocktail.
I know beer cocktail is. It's a cool thing there, especially if you're doing it right, which it sounds like we're doing here. They've got a shandy, which is something that I'm actually kind of cool with a shandy. But this, so do you just kind of mix? You just kind of get some ginger beer, and how would you?
So we actually make the ginger beer in house.
Whoa, really?
And it's one recipe we still are working on. So we don't actually sell the ginger beer by itself, but we would like to once we get the recipe figured out. But right now, it's just a ginger soda.
So it sounds like you need people to come in. Once again, 1080 East O'Galley Boulevard, Indian Harbor Beach, and do a little bit of R&D for you.
We'll take some R&D.
We need some people to do some research and development. We need asses in seats and beers in hands to make this thing happen. Because I like the idea of making your own ginger beer. That's great.
Well, one of the cool things about that I like about Playa Linda, I really like the original brewery in Titusville downtown. I can bring my kids and they get like root beer that they make on site.
Right.
That's cool. But you can also do like with a ginger beer or root beer, you can ferment it longer and and
make
have
it hard,
an
yeah.
adult
Oh, yeah.
hard
Exactly,
version. Are
yeah.
you planning on doing that with the ginger beer once you get the recipe right?
We're still debating on
Not
how
sure
they said,
yet.
yeah.
Once again, he knows a guy, so if
Yeah.
it can happen, he'll
If we
make
get
it
enough
happen.
people
Yeah.
asking, we can probably make it happen. Right now, we just want to get the soda side of it down because we do
Yeah.
want to have some things
Like
for
to
the
work
kids
with
and stuff.
the ice cream company over there too, and
Nice.
get our sodas to them.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
that's a
then
good
you've got
idea.
your Beachelada, which once again, Beachelada, because of Beachfly Brewing, but a Michelada, you can try one of those. It's the best way I could say it. It's kind of Bloody Mary-ish, but with beer. I mean, that's kind of the best thing. So if you like a Bloody Mary, if you need a little tomato in your life, then that's definitely something for you. Once again, I know we're at a time constraint, so I don't want to keep you guys any longer than I have to. You guys have been so gracious with your time. It's actually been really fun, surprisingly fun. I didn't.
You were expecting to be miserable? the whole
I
night,
expected to
Joe?
be so miserable because of the cold of the weather. Because when it gets cold here
what a
in
baby.
Florida, everybody in Florida just kind of they get really miserable. But maybe it's warm out there. It's been a while since I've been outside, so. Thanks, guys. It's been a really great experience. I've learned a lot about your brewing. We've learned a lot about the history. I'm serious, guys. You need to get down here. They're making good beer. They're good people. They are, getting it done. So you can find them, beachflybrewing.com. They're on Facebook, Beachfly Brewing, and they're on Instagram, Beachfly Brewing. I don't know if you guys are seeing a trend there.
Pattern.
And once again, they're at 1080 East O'Galley Boulevard, Indian Harbor Beach. That's Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. So if you're not in Florida, we'll buy a plane ticket, come down here, immediately come to this brewery.
Only an hour outside Orlando.
Yeah, only an hour
Worth a
outside
visit.
Orlando. You can fly right into Melbourne Airport, which is just
True.
up the street, and then you can get a beer here, then hop right back on a plane and go home if you like. I mean, it's totally doable depending on where you live. But once again, thanks a lot. Always remember, if it wasn't for beer, you wouldn't be here.